somebody on the introvert-extrovert scale where I think I definitely have introvertish leanings. I credit two people for providing me with the four pillars of conversation that I've learned through life. The one is Michael Feldman. You may recall him on Wisconsin Public Radio, where he had a game program of sorts. It's the only game program in which I saw the moderator really cheat so that people could win. He wanted people to win, and he always started out engaging people with three questions. The one was, what's your name? The one was, where are you from? And the third one was, what do you do in life? Now, these are good questions to ask people when you're first meeting, and they serve well, but sometimes they don't get conversation off the ground, and that's where my father-in-law was so helpful. He said, what's the weather like where you're from? I never knew anybody that could get as much conversation about a question about the weather as he could. But it seems, especially this week when we have notice about 2014 being the warmest year in recorded history, that weather is something that we talk about very much. But it all kind of boils around in some ways about where you're from. And that question, and we're a community of people who are from many places. The places that you come from are significant in identifying you and may elicit even our prejudices as we say, oh, I'm from Pennsylvania, I'm from Indiana, I'm from where you are. And it's one of those things that you can never walk away from. The fact is, I was born in Montgomery County Hospital in Norristown, Pennsylvania, USA, planet Earth. Those are facts of my life that are undeniable, and yet I know that because I lived in Norristown, there were other people in Pennsylvania who thought not very highly of me because of where I was from. That is very much the question that when Nathanael hears from Philip that Jesus is the one about whom Moses and the prophets were talking and writing, he said, how can anything good come from someone from Nazareth? It's one of those attributes that if you're from the wrong place, I guess it's difficult to imagine good things occurring or important things occurring from people who come from the wrong place. And in many ways, we play that out in our society today. Where are you from? But it's not just where you're from. Well, it could be from where you're from. Are you an American? Or are you an immigrant? And in the politics of the day, it seems that immigrants are suspect and true Americans are to be worthy and valued. There are other attributes that are ascriptive, those things that we can't deny or walk away from. It could be your age. I am a baby boomer. And this week I was reading the pushback that Generation Xers and Yers are articulating against the baby boomers that we are a privileged people and they are, as a generation, disadvantaged by things that we have done. And yet we can say the same thing perhaps about the Great Generation or these generational conflicts. A young woman we know who, as she turns 30, is coming to D.C. to take a very fine job in the Department of Education at a fairly high level, and her major concern is she will have a very hard time because she's too young. Or the 55-year-old who is having a very hard time getting back into the workforce after losing a position because they're too old. Our age is a way we get marked. Charles Blowen, writing in the New York Times about the events of this year, talking about how the irony that when a white person goes into a crowd and shoots a gun, they are mentally ill, but an African-American male is predisposed to be violent and therefore is treated in a completely different way because of who they are. Some ascriptive feature that you cannot deny is part of who you are. It may be that you're male or female. It may be that you come from a particular ethnicity. The things that shape our identity that we cannot deny are part of who we are sometimes the basis upon which we are judged. Fairly? I think not. Usually unfairly. And so we have this reaction that Philip goes to Nathanael Nathanael, who's considered, as Jesus says, to be an Israelite who has no deceit, another word is guile, that he demonstrates nothing of bad character. In the Greek, the word is Tauros, and Tauros was the god of deceitfulness and foolery. The spirit who was recognized by the gods who was the one who could trick people. He was the one who established his identity by making an imitation statue of Althea, the truth, or veritas, the truth. It was so convincing that the gods were so impressed that he became the one who could fool you and mislead you and trick you and exploit you and do all those things. There was none of that. None of that, Jesus said in Nathanael. He was an Israelite who showed none of these characteristics. He was a genuinely good guy. And yet he was the one, when he heard Jesus was from Nazareth, said, "Oh, he's from the wrong place, wrong side of the tracks." He might have said, "Oh, he's got the wrong family or tribal or ethnic or racial group. Oh, he is really foreign to the ways of the world. Oh, he's uneducated. Oh, all these things that good people sometimes practice as prejudices in their lives in reacting to the people who come to them and somehow discredit. Even good people show prejudice. And so the gospel unfolds that Philip has come to Nathanael and says to him, "Oh, you need to meet Jesus. You need to meet Jesus." This meeting of Jesus and the ground of who you are out of your being is something that Paul talks about in the epistle of today, that he says all things are lawful in the translation. I'm fascinated that this word lawful actually is ek estai, out of your being, out of who you are. That lawfulness could be authenticity. It could be rightness, out of my rightness, out of my authenticity, out of who I am and what I do and what comes naturally and what the world, in fact, recognizes as legal in many situations as the conversation goes on. He says, all things are lawful, are right, are authentic. I am free to do it all. But not all things are beneficial or right or good. Not all things help me put my life together. Some things work against that. Some things are detrimental. And so he says that all things are right and good and authentic for me, but I will not be dominated by any one of them. I will not be subjugated to any one of these things that are right or good. And he goes on into an essay then that talks about the practice of the day that differentiated Jews, faithful Jews, from the pagan religions, where in the pagan religions, for the great festivals, you went into the temple, and there was all kinds of sex going on. There were temple prostitutes, and the fertility rites were ones where people were fully engaged in the practice of sexuality of that day. And Paul, looking at that, says that, and the idea of engaging a prostitute in the temple to engage in that, the transactions that occur, that when Paul talks about fornication, I think he's talking about transactional sex, that I come to you, I give you something, and you give something back to me. He says, he looks at that and says, oh, the body is not meant for this. Your body, your being, your living being, your person, you're not meant for that. Do you not know that your bodies are actually limbs of Christ? That your limbs, you are attachment. When you engage in something, when you do something, it's like you are the hand of Christ in action. And when you do something that is so obsessive, compulsive, engaging as these sexual acts, Bernini in his statuary and Caravaggio in his painting in the Counter-Reformation time, if you look at their artwork, the relationship between religious ecstasy and sexual ecstasy in art is virtually indistinguishable, the critics will tell you. And yet, as you become engaged in that kind of ecstatic moment with someone or something other than God, and through this transactional relationship, you are really separating yourself from God. Anyone who is glued to the Lord becomes one spirit, he says, but when you become glued, united, the root in the Greek is glue. When you glue yourself, when you attach yourself to someone or something in that kind of transactional, quick and easy relationship that breaks the seal that you have with God or others, that is a problem, he says. You no longer are in the Spirit, but when you glue yourself, when you attach yourself to God, when you are united to God, you are embraced by this holy breath that envelops you and fills you and keeps you and gives you life. Anyone who is united or glued to the Lord becomes one spirit. Your body is a holy temple, he says, of the Holy Spirit within you. In this Spirit, then, that's this ground of being, that when one comes and looks at someone, as Nathanael does, as he turns to Jesus and hears about Jesus and says, oh no, this can't be. But then he goes, he follows, and Philip says, come and see. And he goes, and Jesus sees him coming and says, this is truly an Israelite who shows no guile, no deceit, who's really a good guy. And he comes to Jesus, and he says, how did you know me? How did you know me? We've never met before. How can this be that you saw this in me? And it's as if he is expressing the spirit of the psalmist who says, oh Lord, you've searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down. You are acquainted with all my ways. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them has yet existed. You know me. Nathanael has an acknowledgement that I am known by Jesus, by God, by this child of God who's come to me. And he responds with a sense of an ecstatic moment. It's a religious moment where he overcomes his prejudice and makes a connection that thrills him. Where did you get to know me? I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you. And Nathanael replied, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. And Jesus looks at him and says, you ain't seen nothing yet. You're going to see greater and greater things. You're going to dream dreams of a better world that can be. And you will see pieces of those dreams come into focus and maybe even realization. It's that gospel message that the person who is flawed, the good person who is so flawed that they can practice their prejudices against others and prejudge them, maybe even to the point of ignoring and excluding them because of their age, their race, their color, their town where they're from, whatever that is, that God takes that person, embraces them, and promises you the vision of better days to come. It's in this spirit, I believe, that Martin King said, but there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. And so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin or their age or their town or their gender or their sexual orientation or any other of these ascriptive facts of their lives, but by the content of their character. May God so bless us that as we receive this Christ into our lives who can overlook our prejudices, our predilections, our shortcomings, and claim us, that we might dream such dreams, and we might aspire to live them, and live them not in solitude or loneliness, but as a people who gather together as one people, under God, called to follow him. And when we do, we will find the way, and we will see yet greater things to come. Amen.